I'm Adam Johnson. My wife and I have grown our real estate business from nothing into the millions, and now my life's purpose is to show you how we did it so that you can do the same. Starting this month, I'm uploading a ton of free and very helpful videos that will be your step-by-step guide to starting an Airbnb business utilizing our go-to property acquisition technique called Subject to. Follow along these course videos, take notes, and dive into the exciting, challenging, yet very rewarding world of real estate investing with me, Adam Johnson. Enjoy.
All right, here's what you came for. What is Subject to and how do we use it? Well, Subject to is the ability to purchase a property subject to the existing mortgage staying in place. And we'll talk a lot more about that in the upcoming slides. Here's what we're going to cover in this class. We're going to talk about the difference between the deed and the mortgage. We'll talk about the pros and cons of buying property subject to. There are risks involved, and I want to make sure that you're well aware of the risk when you get into this type of business. And also we'll talk about the exit strategy. Once you acquire the home, that's only half the fun. Now that we have the property, what do we do with it? Do we make it a long-term rental? Do we flip and sell it? What are our options as a subject to homeowner? Let's jump right into it. So first thing first, a deed and a mortgage. What are the differences, okay? So you have two different vehicles. They're not the same thing. On one hand, you have the deed, which shows ownership of the property. It may have multiple names or one name. On the other hand, you have mortgage, which shows the financial responsibility of the property. They're not the same thing. Deed shows ownership, it's a piece of paper. Mortgage shows financial responsibility. So all of our properties that we purchase subject to, the deed is in our business name, the mortgage is in the seller's name. So just keep that is literally as simple as it needs to be. It's not much more challenging than that. So let's talk about the mechanics of a subject to and what really happens with the deed and the mortgage and how that works, okay? So when you buy a property subject to, the deed which shows ownership, let's use Steve Smith, for example. Steve Smith owns a property. So Steve Smith is on the deed, Steve Smith is on the mortgage. So if I buy a property from Steve Smith subject to, the deed which shows ownership transfers from Mr. Smith to my business, Johnson Property Investments. However, the mortgage, which shows financial responsibility, stays in Mr. Steve Smith's name. I then make the mortgage payments directly to the bank, Wells Fargo, PennyMac, whoever, on their behalf, directly until I either A, pay off the mortgage in full, or refinance the property, or sell the home outright. So those are the three ways that the mortgage will be taken off of the seller's name, off the information. So it's that simple. Remember, deed shows ownership, mortgage shows financial responsibility. They're not the same thing. They do not have to have the same names. So when you purchase a property subject to, do you put the deed in your name? You can. So if I wanted to buy the property from Mr. Steve Smith and put it into my name, Adam Johnson, I could do that. Now, I would never, ever, ever do that. If you remember one of the other classes, that I highly recommend having an S Corp or an LLC or a separate entity for liability purposes. Always talk to your CPA and your attorney with subject to transactions so they can give you the best insight and their guidance. So you can deed the property to yourself. You can deed the property to your business, which is what we typically do. Put it into our S Corp. And it works out really well for us. Another option is you can put it in a family trust, okay? Please talk to your attorney so they can explain to you very in detail how the trust operate. I am not an expert in that, so I don't want to waste your time with that. But you can put it in a family trust. You can, for example, you can put it in a Smith family trust, giving you the ability to work within that trust for that property. It can get kind of cloudy, so again, talk to your attorney. Or you can put in a business trust. You can have a business trust and put properties in that as well. That's a little advanced technique, but by all means, you have options. You don't have to just purchase a property, put in your name, and hope nothing bad happens. So you have those options. Always talk to an attorney. Ask your CPA as far as tax implications when it comes to trust, because there's different regulations and those types of things as opposed to just dealing with a business. So the mortgage. So what happens when we purchase a property subject to with the mortgage? The mortgage is going to stay in the seller's name. So Mr. Smith will still have that mortgage on his credit report, okay? Now, my sellers always ask me, well, what happens if you don't sell, if you don't pay the mortgage? I always tell them, take me to court. I am legally responsible because I put that in our contract. I am legally responsible to pay that mortgage. I'm not financially responsible, meaning with the mortgage company, it's not going to be on my credit report. It's not kind of against my debt to income ratio because it's in the seller's name. However, if I, the subject to buyer, do not perform to everything in our purchase agreement, which states that I will make the mortgage payments in full on the first of each month, starting on said date, then by all means, please take me to court. And that's what I tell every seller, to give them that peace of mind that I have something to lose as well. And I tell everyone that, that again, if I can't perform to what's in the purchase agreement or any other documentation, you should take me to court. That's how the legal system works. And then the last note I'll tell you, as far as a mortgage is concerned, I recommend always making the mortgage payments directly to the mortgage company. Okay. So the way we do this is we get the mortgage login information from the seller, to include the username and password and any other information, for example, what is your dog's name? What was the first car you drove? Those types of, those answers to those questions to get into the mortgage information so that we can change the mortgage payment information to our business checking account. So I would never, ever, ever pay the seller, the mortgage amount for that month and hope that they make the payment to Wells Fargo. So in our purchase agreement, it states that me, the incoming buyer, the subject to buyer, will pay the mortgage payment directly to Wells Fargo, PennyMac, whoever the mortgage company is, for said property. So that's my recommendation. Don't ever pay the seller and anticipate they're going to pay the mortgage company for you. Don't do that. The pros and cons. Like everything else, nothing is foolproof. There's always risk involved. The pros of purchasing a home subject to is that you can do it with little to no money. We have purchased probably 35, 40 houses that we took no money to the closing table, and they were ready to go. They were rentable or ready for Airbnb within the next couple of days after we acquired the homes. We've had a few properties that we purchased that were maybe $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 behind on mortgages. We negotiated the contract so that they'll pay us back. So we fronted that $3,000 or $4,000 prior to closing to catch the mortgage back up. So little to no money into a house. It's great to own a house for $2,000. That's a powerful way to start acquiring properties. You don't have to qualify for a loan as a subject to home buyer. I have never once talked to a seller and they asked me for proof of income, for my credit report, or anything of that nature. So that's great for you because you don't have to jump through hoops. None of this counts towards your debt to income ratio because it's not in your name. And I can buy as many houses as I can, get my hands on without having to worry about not being lendable to because of debt to income or because I have so many loans already out there. And you can purchase properties very, very fast. There has literally been, we bought 4 properties in one day. Back in December of 2017, we bought 7 properties in 1 month. You can do this very, very quickly when the stars align and everything is going your way. You can be very proactive and start acquiring properties. We bought 5 houses in the first few months. We started learning everything, and then we bought 11 houses in the next 5 months. We bought 19 houses over the next 12 months after that. It just started snowballing, and you can do that because, again, you don't have to jump through hoops to get approved by a lender. All those things that are challenges when purchasing a property, you don't have to deal with that because this is a unique way that you can act fast with the subject to method. Now the cons is that there's 2 cons that I usually talk about. And the one is that the seller is still on the mortgage. Okay. So they're still on the mortgage. It's still on their credit report, and we disclose that up front as part of our statement of understanding, part of our 6 documents that we have all of our sellers look over and sign and get notarized. So they're still on the mortgage. It still counts against their debt to income ratio. Okay. But I tell all my sellers, and they can vouch for this, is that we've never missed a mortgage payment on their behalf. So if anything, we've improved their credit scores, and we have many of our sellers that we helped avoid foreclosure, that we helped avoid bankruptcy. We've actually helped improve their credit, making that large mortgage payment on the first of each month indefinitely. So it's been actually beneficial for them working with us. And then you also have the due on sale clause. That's another negative. Now, what is the due on sale clause? The due on sale clause is in 99.9% of mortgages that I've ever seen. I've never seen one without it. Even my personal residence mortgage. What that means is that the bank can call your mortgage due in full whenever they feel like it. So just because, let's say for example, USAA calls me tomorrow and says, hey, we need all $250,000 you owe us. And even though that I have mortgaged the property for 30 years, they have that right and it's in their contracts. Why is this important? Because one of the due on sale clauses is that they have the ability to call the note due if the property ever transfers from seller to anybody else, which is in every contract. So I always tell my sellers, this is always a possibility. It has never happened to us. It's never happened to any subject to investor that I know of, but I want to be upfront and honest that is a possibility. I tell my sellers that the banks are in business to make money. And if a bank were to call a house, a note due in full, and that property going into foreclosure, that bank is going to lose money for the next 12 to 18 months dealing with attorneys, dealing with the city, the county, the taxes, and all that kind of stuff. And the banks are not in business to lose money and report losses to their shareholders. So I had one bank one time call me about one of the properties, and I was upfront and honest, and I told them that yes, we have the property, and the reason it was deeded from sellers to us is because the sellers were about to lose the property. They couldn't afford the property. I told the attorney at Wells Fargo, I said, we have made every payment in full for the last 4 years, and we will continue doing so. That's it. The rest is history, and we still have that property today. We're still receiving passive income. We still have tenants in that property, and nothing has slowed down. What I'm saying is be ethical and be honest about every possibility up front, and that's what we've been doing. And that's now every house is a completed transaction. Some people back out, and I understand that because the seller and us both have to be comfortable with everything, and it's got to be a win-win situation for us to even move forward at all. So you have the pros and cons. Talked about that. Exit strategy. Buying the house is half the fun. Now you have a new property, a new 1,300 square foot, $250,000 house. What do you do with it? Well, you can do a few things. We'll talk about 4, and we've done all 4. And by all means, you can do this as well. You can either flip the house and sell it for a profit. This is not as common and subject to, because in general, the properties that we acquire subject to have little equity. So in order to flip a property and sell it, you need a good amount of equity, maybe $50,000, $80,000, $100,000, so that you can put money into the property, still pay off closing costs and all those fees to be able to make a profit. When buying a property subject to, in general, there's little to no equity, and that's how we're able to acquire the properties. And what I mean by equity is, I mean the spread from what the property is worth. So let's say a house is worth $200,000, and let's say that these sellers owe $190,000. Well, that's only $10,000 of equity. However, when you look at the closing costs and other fees involved, a seller cannot sell the house and not come out of pocket, because in general, a seller pays about 10% closing costs. They pay about 3% for their realtor, 3% for the buying realtor, and about 3.5% to 4% for title fees, closing docs, and those types of fees as well. So if a person were to sell a property for $200,000, they would pay about $20,000 in closing costs. That means their take home, their net, is $180,000. From that point, you have to subtract what the mortgage is. The example I just gave you is that the seller owes $190,000. So in this example, if the seller receives $180,000, but they owe $190,000 on the mortgage, they're out of pocket $10,000. So not too often have we flipped houses on a subject to purchase. We have a few times, but that's not normal. That's not as common. What we prefer to do is make them long-term rentals. So when we get a property subject to, we go in, we make sure that it's good to go. We take our pictures, we make sure the paint is good, the floors are good. Any issues, we take care of those, and then we put it on Zillow and start trying to find great tenants. And that is, in today's market, that should not be a challenge. If you're a good homeowner, if you're a good landlord, and you have a great property and you market the right way, you should have no problem finding great tenants for your properties. Option 3 is short-term rentals. By now you probably have heard of the term Airbnb. You've heard of websites like VRBO and those types of things. Those are short-term rentals, meaning we can have a property that we acquire subject to, and if we want to make it a short-term rental and have people rent from us for 1 day, 1 month, 1 week, we can do that. There's a lot more moving pieces, and there's another course that we're creating here shortly regarding the short-term rentals and Airbnb. And I will say up front, our short-term rentals are way more profitable than our long-term rentals, but there's also a lot more moving pieces with the short-term rentals. So with a traditional long-term rental, you get a tenant, they pay you every month, you respond to any issues. It's pretty simple. With a short-term rental like Airbnb, you have people coming in, sometimes 2 or 3 people a week. You're dealing with different people, different personalities, different family sizes. Some have pets, all these other factors. So for us, short-term rentals are, as I said, much more profitable, but also many more moving pieces, many more headaches. It's not for everybody. However, we love it, and we have had great success with the short-term rental process. And then lastly, the fourth option I can tell you about is you can make a subject to property your personal residence. There's nothing wrong with that. You own the property. You can put the property into your business name. It can be, Steve Smith LLC Home Buyers, whatever it is. And then you yourself and your family can move into the property. As long as you are making the mortgage payment, you're living up to the terms in your purchase agreement, all is well. Everything's going to work out just well. But regardless of the 4 exit strategies that we talked about, you have a new property and you've done it. You purchased the home subject to with little to no money that you didn't have to jump through hoops. You didn't have to go get qualified by a bank, and it happened relatively fast. We have purchased homes subject to in 7 days, in 1 week. I've purchased from contact to meeting at the closing table, 1 week. The only thing that takes a little bit of time is getting the inspectors in there. The home inspector, the HVAC inspector, the termite inspection can take a little bit of time because everyone's busy. So you can move fast with subject to, and we do, and it's a great way to acquire properties. We'll talk about, in closing, I'll talk about the 4 benefits of rental real estate. Now, as I said, you can, if you want to flip the subject to and sell it, you can, but there's much more wealth to be built by holding on to these properties. I'll cover 4. The number 1 is most important, is the passive income that these properties produce for us. Okay, so in general, our rule of thumb is a 30% rule. So if I acquire a subject to property, what I want to do is make at least 30% profit on that property. How do I do that? Okay, I take the mortgage amount times 1.3. That's times 130% of the mortgage. So for example, if I acquire a new property and the mortgage paid to the payment to the mortgage company is $1,000, I say 1,000 times 1.3, and that gives me 1,300. Now what I'm doing with that number is I'm going to look to see if I can get rent for $1,300 for this property, and if I can, I'm jumping on it. That's my 30% rule. If I can get 30% profitability on each subject to, I'm jumping on it. No questions asked. Those are the deals that I love those deals. So the passive income, now you say that times 10, that's $3,000. And that's just the minimum that we're looking for as far as a 30% rule. We have properties that literally, that we've had for 4 or 5 years that double the mortgage. So with little smaller houses that are $600 mortgage payments that we now have them on Airbnb, and we'll have a net profit of sometimes $1,500, $1,800, $2,000 depending on the market, the time of year, and other factors. So passive income is the name of the game. That's why we're in real estate, for that reason alone, passive income. The second thing we'll talk about is appreciation. Okay, in general, houses usually go up in value. There's many factors as far as location, things to do in the area, taxes in the area, jobs coming to the area, jobs leaving the area. There are many factors that determine how quickly a home will appreciate. The rule of thumb is that each home will appreciate 3% compounding year over year. Now that's not guaranteed. Some markets appreciate slower than that. Some markets appreciate way faster than that. So we got houses that have blown that 3% rule out of the water. Again, depending on certain in the area where they are in the city and those things. So appreciation, 99% of the time a house will go up in value, but not every time, not guaranteed. So those are 2 things. The third thing